Imagine this. You wake up, shower, commute, sit down at your desk, and start the work you were trained for, hired for, and paid decently to do. The people around you are fine. The office isn't hostile. Your boss isn't evil. And yet, by lunchtime, a quiet dread starts creeping in, a subtle, choking sense that something inside you is dying, day by day, week by week. You check the clock more than your progress. You fantasize about quitting, about doing anything else. But then you keep going, because this is what you're supposed to do, right? But what if the problem isn't you? What if you're not broken? What if you're not lazy, unmotivated, or lacking in discipline? What if the real problem is that you're stuck inside a system that was never designed with your humanity in mind? We've been told that work is noble, that effort leads to success, that showing up and grinding through the discomfort is part of becoming an adult. But deep down, millions of people feel the same unspoken truth. I hate what I do, and I don't even know why. Peter Drucker once said, "People are not lazy. They simply have impotent goals, goals that do not inspire them." And that's exactly what modern work has become, a machine that robs people of purpose, while dressing up productivity as virtue. You aren't exhausted because you're soft. You're exhausted because you're spending 40 hours a week chasing goals that don't belong to you. You're sacrificing your time, your energy, your soul for something you don't believe in, can't control, and often barely understand. And here's the twist no one talks about. The system isn't malfunctioning. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do, not to uplift you, not to liberate you, but to extract from you your labor, your obedience, your silence. And the more you feel drained, the more you're told it's your fault. Not working hard enough, not being grateful enough, not thinking positive enough. But what if this quiet misery, this aching sense that you were meant for more, isn't dysfunction? What if it's a warning, a message from the part of you that refuses to be silenced? The part Carl Jung called the self, the deep, authentic core of your being that cannot thrive while you're wearing a mask. Because long before burnout became a buzzword, Jung warned, a life lived through a false identity leads not to fulfillment, but to fragmentation. And that's where our story begins. So what exactly is breaking inside you, and why does it feel so difficult to explain? Carl Jung gave us a language for this invisible fracture. He believed that within each of us lives the self, the whole undivided truth of who we are. It's not the version of you shaped by expectations or obligations. It's the part of you that existed before the world told you who to be. But to survive in society, we can't walk around fully exposed. So we develop what Jung called the persona, a mask we wear to be accepted, to be liked, to fit in. And in the modern workplace, that mask becomes your uniform. You smile when you're not okay. You agree when you secretly disagree. You present a polished, filtered version of yourself that's been optimized for performance, not authenticity. Day after day, meeting after meeting, you're rewarded for how well you play the role, not how truly you show up. You become a brand, not a human being. And while the world applauds your professionalism, something inside you is slowly suffocating. Jung warned that this separation between self and persona creates what he called ego fragmentation. You appear composed, competent, calm, but inside, you're anxious, lost, and quietly falling apart. Because when you live through a mask long enough, you begin to forget who's underneath. The person you were meant to become gets buried under deadlines, office politics, performance reviews. You don't just lose touch with your soul, you begin to question if it ever existed in the first place. The terrifying part? This fracture doesn't scream, it whispers. It shows up as mild irritation you can't explain. That Sunday night dread before Monday. The sudden envy when you see someone living freely. It shows up in the way your body tenses before meetings, how you can't relax even after work, how your smile feels forced more days than not. Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And in today's world, that's more than a spiritual challenge. It's an economic one. Because the system doesn't want your full self. It wants the persona, predictable, compliant, replaceable. And yet, the evidence is clear. When people work in roles that clash with their core personality types, their stress skyrockets. A 2022 MBTI Foundation report found that people whose jobs conflict with their natural temperament are nearly 3 times more likely to report chronic anxiety and burnout. Not because they're weak, but because they're misaligned. This isn't just emotional pain, it's spiritual disintegration. And unless we address it, no amount of time off or promotion will fix what's breaking. And here's where the tragedy deepens. This fragmentation of the soul isn't just an unfortunate side effect of work. It's baked into the very design of the system. Because modern work wasn't created to nurture your potential. It wasn't built to help you grow, connect, or self-actualize. It was engineered specifically and methodically to produce output. The origin of your 9-to-5 misery traces all the way back to the Industrial Revolution. Before that, most people worked with their hands on their land, with direct connection to what they created. But with factories came machines. And with machines came a new problem: how to make human beings act more like them. That's where Frederick Winslow Taylor enters the story, the father of scientific management. Taylor's obsession wasn't with human development, it was with efficiency. He believed the best worker was not the most fulfilled, but the most optimized. Someone whose every movement, every second, could be measured, analyzed, and maximized. Under Taylorism, people stopped being people. They became parts, replaceable, predictable, controllable. And that mindset didn't disappear when we moved from factory floors to open-plan offices. It evolved. Today, we no longer clock in with punch cards. We clock in with KPIs, performance reviews, behavior tracking software, and productivity dashboards. Every click, every pause, every break is scrutinized, not to understand your humanity, but to measure your efficiency. Jung would have called this the final stage of alienation, the moment your actions are no longer connected to your soul. When work becomes so separated from meaning that it turns into a ritual of quiet self-erasure. When you no longer ask, "Does this align with who I am?" but only, "Will I hit the metric?" Your identity collapses into a spreadsheet, and the system rewards compliance. It praises the so-called culture fit. But let's be honest, culture fit often just means easy to manage. It means you won't question, you won't challenge, you won't disrupt the hierarchy. You'll play your part and wear your mask, and in return, you'll be given stability, not fulfillment. But even the numbers are turning against this model. According to Gallup's 2023 report, a staggering 85% of employees worldwide report feeling not engaged or outright disengaged from their work. That's not a fluke, that's a feature. That's what happens when a system values output over essence. And unless we start to question that design, we'll keep blaming ourselves for a kind of misery that was never personal. It was structural. So if modern work was designed without your soul in mind, what happens when you're forced to live inside that machine? You burn out, not because you're weak, not because you're lazy, but because you've been severed from the very thing that keeps human beings alive, meaning. Carl Jung once said, "He who has a why can bear almost any how." And yet, most people working today are drowning in how, endless emails, deadlines, tasks, but starving for why. You do what's expected. You chase goals you didn't choose. You spend your energy performing routines that, deep down, feel hollow. And when you finally pause to ask yourself what it's all for, there's silence. That silence is the wound. Burnout isn't a personal failure. It's not about lacking hustle or needing a better morning routine. Burnout is what happens when your soul goes on strike. It's your psyche telling you that the life you're living is unsustainable. Jung believed that when the self is ignored for too long, when our truth is silenced in favor of external demands, another part of the psyche begins to stir: the shadow. The shadow is everything we repress: the rage, the grief, the longing to escape. It's the parts of us we hide to remain socially acceptable. But when you're forced to perform a life that isn't yours, the shadow doesn't stay quiet. It leaks through your exhaustion. It screams through your apathy. It sabotages your motivation, your focus, your relationships. Not because you're broken, but because some deeper part of you is demanding to be heard. That's why burnout feels so much bigger than being tired. It's not just physical fatigue, it's existential fatigue. It's waking up and realizing you've been running at full speed in the wrong direction, and you don't know how to stop. Your body is still moving, but your spirit checked out long ago. And science is catching up to what Jung warned about decades ago. In 2019, the World Health Organization officially recognized burnout as a workplace phenomenon, not a mental illness, but a systemic response to chronic stress and meaninglessness. Meanwhile, studies published in Harvard Business Review show that burnout isn't most strongly correlated with workload. It's most strongly linked to lack of control, lack of recognition, and lack of purpose. In other words, people don't break because they're doing too much. They break because what they're doing doesn't matter. Or worse, because it matters to someone else but not to them. And the tragedy, most of them will never say a word. They'll just keep showing up, smiling, producing, surviving, until the shadow does what they won't: shut everything down. And here's the cruelest part of all. Not only does the system exhaust you, it convinces you that you deserve it. From the time you were a child, you were taught that working hard is noble, that suffering is a sign of virtue, and that if you're unhappy, it's not because something's wrong with the system, it's because you haven't pushed yourself hard enough. This isn't just pressure, it's programming. We grow up absorbing these quiet beliefs like gospel. If you're tired, work harder. If you're struggling, don't complain. If you want something better, earn the right to have it. Success takes sacrifice, they say, but they never define how much or whether what you're sacrificing is actually worth it. Over time, we internalize a toxic equation. Pain equals progress, exhaustion equals excellence, discomfort equals morality. So when we start to break down under the weight of meaningless work, we don't question the work, we question ourselves. Carl Jung warned of this exact phenomenon. He believed that modern society was losing its ability to hear the inner voice, that as we advanced materially, we regressed spiritually. He wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." In other words, if you don't confront the hidden beliefs steering your behavior, you will mistake their effects for destiny. And it starts early. Think about the way we praise children. We don't reward honesty, we reward obedience. A good child isn't the one who expresses their truth. It's the one who sits still, follows instructions, and doesn't cause trouble. Over time, we learn that being agreeable earns approval, and being authentic earns isolation. That script doesn't change when we grow up. It just follows us into adulthood, where our bosses replace our teachers and deadlines replace our grades. The result? By the time we reach midlife, we're no longer asking, "What do I want?" We're asking, "Why do I feel so disconnected?" A 2021 New York Times survey revealed that nearly 70% of adults feel like they're living a life that doesn't reflect who they truly are. Not because they failed, but because they succeeded at playing a role that was never written for their soul. And when that realization finally hits, it doesn't feel empowering, it feels shameful. Because we've been trained to feel guilty for wanting ease, for craving rest, for dreaming of something more human. But here's the truth most people never get to hear. Escaping this misery doesn't always mean walking away from your job. It means walking back to yourself. Because the real problem isn't just what you do, it's what you've become in the process of doing it. You've lost contact with your core, and Carl Jung believed the only way back is through a lifelong journey he called individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are. Individuation isn't self-help fluff. It's deep inner work. It means peeling off the layers of who you were told to be, at work, in relationships, in society, and rediscovering the self that existed before all that. It means you stop defining your worth by KPIs or performance reviews and start asking the deeper questions. What do I value? What do I want to build? What kind of energy do I want to bring into the world? This doesn't always mean quitting your job or burning everything down. Sometimes it means redesigning the role you already have, shifting your focus toward work that aligns with your unique temperament and natural talents. It means building your day around your inner rhythms, not just external obligations. And more than anything, it means protecting what Jung called your sacred space, a part of your life that belongs only to you. That sacred space might be small at first. 15 minutes to write in a journal, a morning walk where no one can reach you, quiet time with books that actually speak to your soul. It might mean learning to say no to what drains you, even when it's expected, or creating before you consume. The goal isn't perfection, it's alignment, and the effects are measurable. A recent Jungian therapy report showed that clients who engaged in active individuation practices experienced up to a 40% reduction in depressive symptoms over time, not because their jobs changed, but because they did. They stopped outsourcing their identity. They reclaimed it. Even visionaries have needed that reset. Take Steve Jobs when he was ousted from Apple in 1985. He didn't immediately launch another empire. He stepped away. He recentered. He explored who he was without the title. And when he came back, he didn't just return with better tech. He returned with vision. He knew who he was, and the world could feel it. That's the power of individuation, not escape, but emergence, not rebellion, but reclamation. And that is the only foundation strong enough to hold a meaningful life. But the question remains, what does a meaningful life actually look like? If individuation is the path back to yourself, what exactly are you walking away from? For most people, the answer is this: a definition of success that was never theirs to begin with. Because somewhere along the way, success stopped being about substance and started being about signals. The right salary, the right title, the right car, house, status, applause. We were taught that if you hit those marks, you'd feel whole. But many people have reached those milestones, and instead of feeling fulfilled, they feel empty. Like they've climbed a ladder, only to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. And that's the quiet betrayal modern work doesn't want you to talk about. That you can succeed on paper and still be starving inside. That you can win the game and still feel like you've lost yourself in the process. Because real success, soul-deep, enduring success, has nothing to do with what you can prove to others. It has everything to do with what you can live with when you're alone, when the noise fades, when the performance ends, and when the mirror reflects not your resume, but your truth. True success isn't perfection, it's alignment. It's waking up and knowing that, even if the world misunderstands you, you didn't betray yourself to be accepted. It's being able to say, I may not be the most admired, the most followed, the most envied, but I am living a life that makes sense to me. In a world addicted to applause, that kind of honesty is radical, because it means you've stopped performing and started becoming. Carl Jung called it the privilege of a lifetime, to become who you truly are, not who your parents expected, not who your industry rewards, not even who you thought you needed to be to survive, but who you were always meant to be, before the world got its hands on you. That kind of becoming doesn't always come with a bonus or a LinkedIn update. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the peace you feel after saying no, in the clarity that follows when you walk away from what looks good but feels wrong, in the joy of creating something that's never been done before simply because it's true to you. The truth is, you don't need to be extraordinary to be fulfilled. You just need to be honest. And sometimes, that's the rarest success of all, because the world will always try to convince you to be someone else, to measure your worth in numbers, to trade authenticity for security. But real power, real freedom, and real peace come from doing the hardest thing of all, being yourself unapologetically in a system that profits when you forget. And if you've made it this far, if something inside you has been quietly nodding, aching, remembering, it's because part of you already knows. You were never the problem. Your fatigue is not failure. Your disillusionment is not dysfunction. It's awareness. It's awakening. The moment your soul starts whispering, there has to be more than this. Because the truth is, you were never meant to fit perfectly into a system designed to flatten complexity, silence curiosity, and reward only conformity. You were meant to grow, to stretch, to evolve, not just upward but inward. You were meant to ask deeper questions, to crave meaning, to feel things others may have numbed. That doesn't make you weak, it makes you awake. So if you've been carrying guilt for not loving your job, for not thriving in a world that feels increasingly disconnected, let it go. You're not broken. You're responding exactly the way a living, breathing soul should respond. When it's being asked to live a life of quiet resignation, that ache in your chest, that restlessness in your gut, that's not pathology, that's prophecy, and you're not alone. This space, this channel, is for people like you. People who feel too much, think too deeply, and refuse to accept that survival is the same thing as living. Here, we explore the philosophies, the questions, the forgotten wisdom that modern life tries to bury, not to escape the world, but to rebuild a stronger self within it. So if this message spoke to something real inside you, don't just scroll away. Subscribe, stay curious, stay defiant, because the journey back to yourself is not a one-time decision, it's a way of life. And sometimes all it takes is one voice to remind you of what you've always known. The system is loud, but your soul is louder.